And we are very happy to be joined here tonight by Dan Spivey, Barry, one of the original Skyscrapers, and Waylon Mercy. I, of course, fondly remember Dan for his time in All Japan teaming with Stan Hansen, but a true legend, Barry. How about that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, too. You know, we've had some really fantastic guests over the last 6 or 7 months, from Butch Reed, Tully Blanchard, Bob Roop. You know, it seems like every week we've got somebody. And how fortunate this week. So we've got a guy, Jeff, and I don't know if you know this, but apparently Dan was trained by Dusty Rhodes in Tampa. And Dan, so tell us a little bit about that the great Dusty Rhodes. And I grew up in Miami Beach, so I grew up going to see wrestling every Wednesday night on the beach. I was in Tampa as I got a little bit older a bunch of times, but you know, Dusty was a god back in those days. So you know, the story that I read, that Dusty somehow discovered you and then trained you, is that correct?
Well, Dusty, to be totally honest about it, I met Dusty in a country western bar, and got to know him from being in there. They used to come in there after matches on Tuesday night or something like that. I've always been a fan of wrestling. You know, I was just a huge mark. And, you know, and Dusty had asked me if I was interested in becoming a wrestler, and I said, sure. And so Dusty gave me, you know, the first opportunity to, you know, to get into professional wrestling. Actually, Barry Windham trained me and Scott Hall. Dusty, I guess, had met Scott somewhere and came up with an idea to call us the American Starship. Where he got that name, I don't know. Eagle and Coyote. And right after Dusty had brought us in, Dusty got the job in Charlotte for Crockett Promotions. And so me and Scott followed Dusty up there. They didn't have a ring up there in Charlotte for some reason. They didn't have a facility for it. You know, they did their TVs on Tuesday night in different little towns. And so they had the ring set up early at the arenas, you know, but sometimes, you know, everybody be coming in, you couldn't train, you know, in front of the audience. So, you know, it was hard. And but I became friends with Ricky Steamboat. And actually, Ricky is the first guy I ever suplexed and drop kicked. And Ricky would go down early in these TV shows that we would do on Tuesdays, and he would work out with me. For some reason, Scott didn't come or whatever, but Ricky is one that, you know, really helped me a lot.
That's a pretty good trainer if you're going to have someone train with you.
Yeah, man, what a talent he is.
So you said you grew up as a wrestling fan. Who exactly did you were you into when you were growing up as a kid?
Dusty.
Yeah.
Dusty was the guy. You know, the Briscoes were awesome. You know, there was you know, the Funks were awesome. They came in there quite a bit, and Harley Race. Gosh, there was so much talent that came through Florida and championship wrestling, and you know, Gordon Soley doing the TV. It was quite interesting. You know, and Eddie Graham was probably the first one to really, you know, caught my attention. Him and the Great Malenko had some awesome battles.
Oh, so you were watching going back to like the 1960s then, because Malenko and Eddie Graham had these massive like Russian chain matches. Yeah, with just bloodbaths taking place throughout the state. So you grew up really in the heyday of that. But here's the irony, is that you never actually worked for CWF though, correct?
No, not during the heyday, or not. You know, I never worked in the Army on Tuesday night. Never got that opportunity, and that's the place where all the history was in Tampa as far as wrestling.
So I just wanted to ask you. I know that you played ball at UGA. You played under Coach Vince Dooley, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and how was your time in Georgia? I know you ended up blowing out a knee. I believe it was your junior or senior year. I'm sure you look back fondly under Coach Dooley, playing under him, though.
I didn't get along with Coach Dooley.
Oh, well, okay, you know, then.
But I'll elaborate on that story. I mean, you know, he wasn't a very friendly guy. You could be walking down the hallway, and he's going to walk right past you. He wouldn't even say hello to you. He was a real asshole of a guy. I tried to leave my sophomore year, and one of the guys, I guess, a couple of guys called defensive coordinator. His name was Herc Russell.
Oh yeah,
What
Georgia
a guy
Southern.
he was. Yeah, man, he was a hell of a guy. And they promised me when I came up there that I'd play on defense, and they had me on offense. And I was just pissed, and I was going to go back and go to the University of Tampa. And Coach Russell blocked me in where I couldn't get out. And he pulled his truck up right behind me, and I couldn't get out. And he started unloading my truck, my car and stuff. So I stayed there because of Art Russell. That's the only reason I stayed at Georgia. And the other thing is that Georgia was the only one that took my college entrance exam for me. So that's why I went there.
That always helps.
Yeah, it did. I could have gone anywhere. And if anybody out there is listening that has, anybody that's thinking about or lucky enough to get a scholarship, go to a school where you're going to grow up. You know, I have all my contacts and everything up in Athens and around Atlanta and stuff. And, you know, I've always lived in Tampa. So, you know, but back then, the University of Florida didn't have any white guys on the team. Not that really mattered. It's just that when I was recruited by Florida, I went up there and all the black guys gave me nothing but a ration of shit. And I said, well, I'm not going there. And Georgia, you know, was all white, and Miami was a renegade school back then, and Florida State hadn't won a game in 2 years. They were 18-2, and they were having practices under chicken wire, 10-foot holes and stuff. It was crazy. So I went to Georgia. My best friend went to Georgia the year before, so that's how I ended up in Georgia.
And of course, later in your career, your UGA affiliation status hooked you up with the Varsity Club, which a lot of people remember you being a part of that with guys like Doc and with Mike Rotundo and with Kevin Sullivan. I'm sure you got to remember those days kind of fondly because you guys were really over.
Yeah, Steiner brothers were involved. After Georgia, I got hurt up there, and I still went to the Jets. A lot of people don't know that. I don't know why, but I went to the Jets after Georgia. Wasn't there long. You know, that's what NFL stands for, not for long. But got hurt.
Were you there with Coach Eubank or the year that Lou Holtz was there?
Lou Holtz, he lasted 11 games. He made it a little bit longer than I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, later on, when I got into wrestling, we got the Varsity Club. You know, that was something that, could have got over really good, but for some reason or another, they didn't push it. So.
Oh, I loved it. I loved that. I loved it.
And all of us were legitimate,
Sure.
lettermen. So, that was not many people. I mean, there was quite a few of us,
Yeah, and definitely, and prior to Waylon Mercy, which we'll get to Waylon Mercy because, it's funny, but if you follow any form of wrestling on social media, people still refer to Waylon Mercy and the beauty. And even though it was short-lived, it didn't really go too far, you were aces in that role. And people still talk about it to this day. And obviously, I think the obvious is that people point out and say the Bray Wyatt character evolved from what you were doing with Waylon Mercy. But you had some great tag team partners. And I know that Jeff is really going to want to talk about Stan Hansen, but you teamed with Mike Rotundo and you teamed with Sid Vicious, Mark Callaway, and obviously Stan Hansen. So how was it transitioning? Because even Sid and The Undertaker, Mark Callaway, two very different guys, two very different styles. And I believe Sid had an injury, if it was a punctured lung, if I recall correctly. That was the switch there. But you guys were just, the Skyscrapers in WCW at that time were just fantastic.
Yeah, and they never gave us a push. It's just really strange why they never did that. Sid had this mysterious injury. It was in New York, and we were working against Scott and Rick Steiner, and I started the match, and 10 minutes into the match, I go to tag him in. He comes to get in the ring, and no one touched him. He's just coming into the ring, and he punctured a lung. I don't know how in the hell that happened. So I ended up getting.
That's not easy to do.
No, but Sid could do it. He was brittle. You guys saw the leg that he broke on TV. That was, his body just couldn't handle his size, I guess. But, that night I got suplexed all over the place because I did the whole match, and the Steiner brothers are Suplex City. So it was a long night for me that night.
So one of the questions we wanted to ask you, Barry actually sent me a note about it the other day. I'm sure you've been asked about this before. The famous squash match that you and Sid had on WCW, where apparently one of the guys decided that he was a bigger star than you two were. Do you remember that match?
Yeah, of course I did. It was horrible. Horrible. I mean, the guy was getting up before I could get up. I mean, it was just horrible. I should have hurt him a lot worse than I did.
Yeah, I think you sent him a bit of a receipt after the match, though, didn't you?
Yeah, of course I did. That was just uncalled. I never had anybody do that before. I was really caught off guard by it all. And, what the hell? At one point during the match, this guy runs into Sid and knocks him on his ass. I said, oh, God. It was a horrible deal.
Gotcha. So what was the difference in teaming with somebody like Sid versus somebody like Mark Callaway? And obviously Sid, brittle and the injury, and Sid does have a reputation where, the reputation that Mark Callaway has is really straight. But what was the difference in teaming with those two guys?
You're dealing with two different guys. I mean, they were both green when they came to me, and they did quite well after they left me, like everybody did. So,
right. Like my ex-wife, actually, Danny. That's right.
Yeah, Sid had this awesome look. I mean, he made all his money just because of his look. The guy,
yep.
The guy doesn't have. I'm just telling the truth. The guy, couldn't even run the ropes good. But he looked great. He really did. And Mark, on the other hand, was an athlete. Mark played basketball. He had a lot of agility. He could walk the ropes, which was impressive. I knew Mark was going to be a star, and he was really good about listening. And, Sid had his own opinions about how to do things, but Mark was, he was a good partner. He really was. And I think he's one of the best big men that ever worked in the business. Great gimmick, and he worked it. Really, I can't say enough good things about Mark Callaway.
There were a lot of guys that were getting over at that point in time because they look good, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, Diesel was a partner for a while, and Scott Hall, of course, was a partner for a while, and Rotundo. I had some good partners.
Well, let me ask you about one of your other partners that you didn't mention there, and that's your time in All Japan with Stan Hansen. How did you enjoy working in Japan, and not just so much teaming with Stan, but going over and working for Giant Baba and doing all those tours over there? Did you enjoy that, or was it sort of a means to an end? What did you think?
No, I mean, it's a funny story about how that happened. I got let loose. Vince let me loose, it was like 95 or 96. And I was unemployed. I owed the government a lot of money on back taxes. I had no idea what I was going to do, and sat at home for about 3 weeks. And Terry Funk called me, which I got to know Terry at WWF back then. And he said, Spivey, how would you like to go to Japan? I said, I'd love to. I didn't know much about it at all. I just knew I might have a job opportunity. And so he calls me back and he says, Spivey, I got you $3,500 a week. But I told him you were such a good kid that you would settle for $3. So I went to Japan, and, they had to put all the gaijins, Americans, Europeans, everybody's a gaijin if you're not Japanese. They put us on this bus. And no one on the bus has ever been to Japan before. I think Rock and Roll Express was on there. Billy, not Jesse Funk. I don't know what his name was. But anyway, there's no
Jesse Barr.
Yeah, that's it. And so we didn't know our way around, or didn't know what. And the first night in, I had Rip Rogers as a partner. He's working a gay gimmick. And they put us up against the two top Japanese over there, and they beat hell out of us, man. And it didn't take me long to smarten up on what was going on. So, I love Japan. There was no politics involved when I was there. They took you on your ability, what you could do in the ring. no gimmicks. There wasn't any gimmicks. There wasn't no politics. It was straight up, 80% real. I mean, as long as you didn't break any bones and didn't draw blood on somebody, it was good. Things, really looked real. And they were. I mean, as far as chair shots and all this stuff, it was hard. I wish I had spent my whole career there and never came back to the States.
I know you guys had a number of series of matches with Steve Williams and Terry Gordy that were just fantastic.
Yeah, those guys were a pleasure to work with. And everybody there was top hand. I mean, from the beginning match to the end, everybody was a top hand there, and it was really it probably took some years off my career because of the physical part of it, but it was awesome. And the Japanese people are awesome. They treated me great. I should have never left.
So it's been said before that Giant Baba was maybe the most honorable promoter in the history of professional wrestling. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, no doubt. That didn't take long. I mean, Vince has been good to me. I have no, I've taken up for Vince on the internet, lawsuits and stuff. I don't know if you guys ever saw me and Billy Jack go at it about that, but Vince was good to me too. But Giant Baba by far was awesome. Man, that's for sure.
Yeah, people have always said guys like Paul Bosch in the U.S. was a real Sam Munchnick, really stand-up guys. But you always hear Giant Baba, put on this upper tier of a guy that he did everything on a handshake, and if he promised you something, he would live up to it. But he expected the same from you. So a lot of respect to him, obviously. So let's talk about Waylon Mercy. Jeff, are you a fan of the Waylon Mercy character?
Well, let me ask you before we start talking about that. Did they have you look at Max Cady and Cape Fear to get ideas, or was that something that was presented in a different way? How exactly did they come up with the character for you?
It was, we were trying to find a character. They wanted me to come in, but, we were trying to find a gimmick for Dan Spivey. And this is the first time I ever had a gimmick in the Skyscrapers, But, even then I was Dan Spivey. But, since I'm from the South and everything, the Max Cady deal was Southern, and so we just touched on it and told Vince about it, and he said, well, let's go with it. And so we did, and I just kind of winged it, from watching the movie. I watched the movie several times, getting ideas, and of course putting it in my own words and my own character. We started out with the vignettes, and the vignettes really got over good. It was a time when everybody was screaming and yelling, on their interviews and stuff. And Max Cady or, Waylon just talked to you, very sinister and real low. And so you had to pay attention to what he was saying or you wouldn't hear him. And it really got people's attention. The vignettes did really well. It was a tough time, in the WWF's business at that time. They weren't doing that well. But anyway, that's how the character came about.
Well, since we're both big movie fans, go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you. So, better actor, Robert De Niro or Al Pacino? Dan, who would you go with?
Robert De Niro.
There you go.
So I was going to ask you a movie question too. So did you see only the Robert De Niro Cape Fear, or did you look at the Robert Mitchum Cape Fear, also the original?
I watched both of them.
Yeah. Course. Which one did you like better?
Robert De Niro.
Okay. So yeah,
they were both good though. I mean, and they both played the part well.
Come out wherever you are.
Excuse me?
I said, come out wherever you are. That was De Niro's line from the movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So go ahead, Bear.
Yeah, so it was a pretty cool thing. So after you left the WWE, is that when you were back in Florida? I know you wrestled for I think it was Florida Championship Wrestling. Was that after Waylon Mercy, or was that before?
No, that was before. I mean, when Waylon Mercy left the WWE, it was it. I never, got back in the ring really.
Oh, that was it. Was
Not
that
really?
Was that,
I didn't. I got operated on 2 weeks after. I got operated 2 weeks after I left.
Was that on your knee? Gotcha.
And 6 months after that, I had my hip replaced. I've had 6 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements, a neck fusion, 14 concussions. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah. Other than that, your nickname's Lucky, right?
So, yeah, right.
Let me ask you, one of the guys I couldn't help remembering that you did work for, talking about promoters, you worked in the UWF under one of the most infamous promoters, our friend Herb. What can you tell us about Herb?
He was a wild man. He was a real mark. He went through all his money, trying to be a promoter. It was sad, really. Even, I was out there in that big fiasco where they rented the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. That place held, I don't know how many people. It's a huge arena, and there's like 1,000 people sitting in the stands. It was horrible. And, it was really kind of sad, especially the way he died. I heard he died of, cocaine overdose, running around Marina Del Rey in the middle of the street naked or something. I don't know. Just heard all kind of weird stories. But, he was a crazy guy.
He was one of the true characters in wrestling, Herb Abrams, in the late 80s for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so, it's a shame, too, because there was a lot of talent in that promotion. Steve Williams was there as well, another guy that, we think so highly of.
Yeah, Doc was there, me and Doc were there. Johnny Ace was there. Brian Blair was there. There was some good talent there, and just didn't get off. So he stiffed them at the MGA Grand. So, I don't know how that didn't turn out good. So, it was just crazy.
So I wanted to ask you, go back to Japan for one quick question that popped into my mind. You were talking about how you wish you could have worked over there your whole career, but you talked about how rough the style was, what they called the King's Road style. So that had to play a part in the shortening of your career, just how impactful all the moves were. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, it took a toll on all of us. It was stiff, and like I said, it was almost just a tad under not real. I mean, it was pretty solid. A lot of guys come over one time, they never come back.
Yeah, exactly, too. So, Dan, you have lived your entire life in the Tampa region. Jeff and I are actually pretty familiar with Tampa. We get over there a couple of times a year. I vacation on Anna Maria Island twice a year, so I'm there a lot. And Jeff is a little bigger than me. He's fleshy. Jim Cornette calls him fleshy.
What up?
Yeah, I just say he's just a little bit chubby. But we both love to eat. We're coming down to Tampa. You've lived there your entire life. What's the one restaurant we have to go to in the Tampa area?
Tampa area. Well, if you like Italian, or Cuban food, Colombian restaurant in Ybor City is awesome.
We have been there.
Where I would go.
We were there, and we saw the flamenco dancers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can't think of there's a huge Burn Steakhouse is another fantastic.
We were there
too.
Well, hell, you guys, I'd be asking you where to go.
Yeah, I noticed Noble Crust. There is an Italian restaurant called Noble Crust that I've been to, and I think there's 3 or 4 locations, and it's out of this world. It's some of the best chick parm I have ever had in my life. It's fantastic.
Awesome. And that's in Tampa, correct?
It's Tampa, and there's one in St. Pete. I think there's 2 or 3 in Tampa, and I know there's one in St. Pete, and that's usually the one that I go to. But fantastic food. And then, Jeff, we always go to Portillo's. Dan, have you ever been to Portillo's?
Yes, I have. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't believe he's not recommending a place in Odessa.
I live further north. I live out here with the Rotundos just about. They live in Brooksville. I live in Spring Hill, which is right next door.
All right. Well, Barry,
Scott McGee actually lives in that area as well. You ever see Scotty?
We train every morning together.
Very nice.
I guess you do. Yeah, guess you do.
No.
He's a good friend. He's been on our show as well. He's a good guy. But yeah.
Okay, so Dan, we're going to leave you with the question we like to ask all of our guests. So here's the scenario. You were a guy that was always well known, dare I say, for being able to handle himself in any sort of negative situation. So let's just say you're out having an adult beverage with some of your friends, and you see a group of guys, maybe about 10 of them, and they're coming over and they got a little bit of the old beer courage, and they want to see if you wrestlers are really tough guys. So you got 10 guys coming at you. Who's the guy you want on your left, and who's the guy you want on your right, Dan?
Oh gosh, let's see. Well, one that comes quickest to mind is Tonga.
That's a name that comes out quite prominently in our question.
And the other one I would say is Stan Hansen.
Okay.
Or if he was still alive, it'd be Doc.
Okay, good choices, both of them. So, well, listen, Dan, we certainly appreciate your time going over some old wrestling memories, some old UGA football stories too. So, go Dogs! I got a daughter that lives up just north of Atlanta. So, we really do appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the big mark out at the Meadowlands, my friend.
Yeah, you guys please come say hello.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, guys.